Hey guys, welcome or welcome back. Tisha here, back with another segment of It's Getting Real. Go ahead and do me a favor and hit that like button. Forgive me as we begin because my notes are a little all over the place, but I want to make sure that I get this out in time, and this is going to be the only opportunity that I have to record before I have to leave. So it's January of 2007. A young woman by the name of Danita Smith's life couldn't be going any better. She's landed a fellowship with her dream job, and she's set to graduate with her master's in just a few short months. Danita Monique Smith was a 25-year-old graduate student born on November 20th, 1981 in Charlotte, North Carolina. Her parents were Shannon and Calvin Smith. She was one of three children. She had a sister and a brother. Described as beautiful, smart, charismatic, loving, sweet, and friendly, she was a 2000 graduate of West Charlotte High School, and then she went on to college where she had a lot going on. She sang in worship and praise inspirational mass choir. She played the saxophone. She helped students at the writing studio by tutoring them. She shot pictures and wrote stories for the student newspaper, the Campus Echo, and she was active in student government. All of this, and she was just an undergraduate student. She was a hard worker that did very well in school despite all that she had to juggle. She received her BA in English from North Carolina Central University in Durham. According to her mother, she always loved the camera. The camera was her friend. It was her way of expressing herself, and she wanted to take photos and she wanted to write. Danita got accepted into the New York Times Student Journalism Institute internship program in 2004. With graduation being just a few months away, at the time of this incident, she was working on her master's thesis, which explored the expression of Black male identity in the works of novelist Richard Wright and rap icon Tupac Shakur. So she's at the finish line. Her career is well underway. She's excelling in journalism and photography. Life is good. She was engaged to her boyfriend of 6 years in November 2006 by the name of Jameer Stroud. They met freshman year in college and they dated for 6 years. Danita referred to him to some of her friends as her perfect match, and she described him as a gentleman, saying that not only was he intelligent and well-rounded, but he was kind, respectful, and loving, and more importantly than anything, he protected her. After listening to this story, though, I've come to the conclusion that what he did was he put her in danger. After they graduated, Danita stayed in Durham to pursue her studies, and Jameer moved to Greensboro, where he became a member of law enforcement. He was a police officer. This meant that they were officially in a long-distance relationship. They were about an hour apart, but despite the distance, they decided that they were going to maintain their relationship. Everything was looking good until the morning of January 4th, 2007. It's winter break. Danita was leaving her Campus Crossing apartment, and as she's walking down the complex steps, something happens, sending her tumbling down. She didn't see it coming. So a little after 10 o'clock a.m., a resident by the name of Corey Smith was walking near a building when he saw a bunch of items tossed all over this outdoor staircase. It was like a water bottle, some keys, a purse, a pair of shoes, and other items. Things that if someone would have dropped and they were capable of, they would have made sure that they picked it up. So he's a little, concerned, and he decides, let's see what's going on here. So he heads down the stairs, and there laying at the bottom of the stairs on the sidewalk, he sees a woman. The last thing in his mind is that a crime has been committed. Instead, he feels like she may have slipped and fallen down the stairs because he sees that there's a lot of blood. So he calls 911, lets them know what he sees, and he doesn't know that in making this call that someone had already called 2 hours prior to that. So let's go back to what happened 2 hours prior. At around 8:10 a.m., a man by the name of Michael, who they say was the maintenance director, some say he was the manager, but either way, he worked for the Campus Crossing apartments in Durham. He heard a shot fired. He saw a woman running from the back of the building 1100. to the front of the building complex, which was odd for him because he said there was a much easier route to get to that parking lot. So Michael pulls his truck up to the truck that the woman got in, which was a burgundy Ford Explorer, with intentions of checking on her as well as seeing if she heard the gunfire. So he saw that she was shaking and crying and covering her mouth, and she tells him that she heard it. She's terrified of guns. It came from over there. So he tells her, wait, I'm going to go ahead and call the police. And she's nervous, looks nervous, decides she's just going to go ahead and drive off. At the time, he wasn't thinking too much of it because he just wanted, to make sure that police would get out there. So he didn't focus on her. He calls 911 to report what he heard. Police later arrive at the scene. They cannot locate where the shot came from, and no report is filed. Let's be clear, these officers did not look. Maybe they're accustomed to hearing gunshots, or maybe it's not protocol for them to look and they thought nothing of it, because had they have looked, they would have seen the same scene that the neighbor found, because it wasn't like she was hiding. She was out in the open at the bottom of the staircase. So he lets them know that another woman heard it also, but she left. He informed them that she was a tall black woman around, 5'10", with a ponytail, and she was driving a burgundy SUV. So let's go back to Corey, who found Danita. He's on, 911. He's talking to the operator, telling him what he's seeing, saying that there's a lot of blood coming from her head. He thinks she fell. The operator says, I need you to check for a pulse. So he's checking for a pulse, and the operator says, and find an ID so we could try to figure out who this person is. While on the phone, he checks the purse, finds out who she is, tells the operator or the dispatcher her name is Danita Smith. Help arrives, but it's too late. Danita was dead. Once the police arrived, it didn't take the police long to realize that Danita's death was no accident, and that she definitely did not die from falling down the stairs, because she had a gunshot wound in the back of her head. Police quickly discover where all the blood is coming from. As I said, she got shot in the back of the head. So that was the gunshot that Michael heard when he originally called 911. Word starts spreading that someone had been murdered in an off-campus housing, and a small crowd forms with people wondering who was murdered and how this could ever happen on this apartment complex, because they weren't accustomed to such a violent act. So Jameer finds out that something is going on at his fiance's complex, and he goes out there and gets out there as fast as he can. He's told by officers that Danita had been shot and killed. If you watch enough crime shows, then you know that he was probably one of the first suspects on their list, because they tend to look at the significant other first. So they're going to be watching him to make sure that his reaction looks and seems genuine. He's very emotional. He gives a statement and is released. He ends up going back home the next morning. The day after, the police call him to ask him some more questions. They ask him what he was doing at the time of the shooting. At the time of the murder, he told police that he had just finished the night shift and he was sleeping in at his Greensboro home, and he's about 50 miles away from the crime scene. They asked if he knew anybody who fit the description of the last person Michael saw. And that is when something clicks. It seemed random at first because Danita didn't have any enemies, but with authorities investigating and then them talking to Jameer, they uncovered a love triangle that Danita did not even know existed. This is when we're introduced to Shannon Crawley. We learned that Shannon Crawley was a single mom who worked as a 911 dispatcher. Ironic, right? She worked with him at the Greensboro Police Department. They start having a friendship, real platonic, nothing wrong with that. And then it turns sexual toward the end of 2004. It lasted for about a year. Danita knew nothing about it. Investigators say that Shannon knew about Danita, but Danita had no clue about Shannon. Everyone said that if she even suspected it, then she would have ended her relationship despite being engaged at the time, which just goes to show you the type of woman that Danita was. During the secret encounters, Shannon got pregnant and later got rid of the baby, if you know what I mean. According to Jameer, her ending the pregnancy also put an end to the physical aspect of their relationship. And after that, she wasn't quite the same. That was about a year before Danita's death. So him and Shannon were together from the year of like 2004 to 2005. And she gets unalived in January of 2007. He said he was done, but he felt like Shannon was stalking him and that he did, kind of blow it off, but it just got worse and worse over time. Police talked to Shannon at the call center, and she tells them that, she knew who Danita was. And despite knowing that, she dated Jameer for a while, but now everything's okay and they're friends. She tells him she's never been to Durham before. She doesn't like guns. She saw Danita a few weeks before the murder at church. And at the time of the murder, she had been taking one of her children to a doctor's appointment. Police, however, later speak with that pediatrician and find out that Shannon never showed up for that appointment, which just so happened to be the day of the shooting. So she lied about that to them. The police were getting ready to leave when one of the co-workers told detectives that Jameer had been, harassing Shannon and that he would call a lot at the job for months. Rather convenient, if you ask me, that they just happened to approach and say that, but this made officers want to take another look. Her co-worker by the name of Ronald Simpson admitted to selling Shannon a 3.8 revolver for her safety in October of 2006. The same type of weapon that the officers knew had killed Danita, because it was a .38 caliber that did it. He said that Shannon was having several break-ins around her house and she needed it for protection, so he sold it to her and he had the papers to show it. But Shannon had told police when she was questioned that she never had a gun. Remember, as I said earlier, she's afraid of guns. Jameer is then questioned about Shannon and if he harassed her, and he denies ever doing that. I feel like if he did ever call her a whole bunch, it was probably to make sure that she got rid of that baby. I hate to say it like that. It's clear, though, that he didn't want to have a family with her. It's very clear. As I said, he says she was the one stalking me, that she would conveniently be running some of the same errands as him, and he would see her sometimes on the street, and she ended up even attending the same church as him, even running into him and Danita, which was odd to him because there are so many other churches in the area that she could have chosen from. And then the final straw for him was her moving into the same neighborhood as him. Police take all this information and they decide they need to talk back to Michael. So they go back to have a discussion with Michael. In his description, I didn't mention it earlier, but he talked about various patches that he saw on the young lady's shirt as she was fleeing the scene. Well, she's a dispatcher, and those same patches were kind of noticed on the different uniforms of the dispatcher. He's shown a picture. He's able to identify what we later learn is Shannon's SUV, but he cannot identify Shannon as the person that he saw fleeing the scene. So investigators are starting to believe that Shannon may have something to do with this, and she may have targeted Danita out of jealousy, that after she got pregnant, she and Jameer both admitted that, he didn't want to have a baby with her. And Jameer insisted that, Shannon had been blowing up his phone and popping up at his places and all those other things. So they felt like maybe she was the one who was obsessed. So they get approval to conduct a search. During a search of her house, they find 911 communication center uniforms with emblems on the sleeves, similar to the one that Michael had described, but they found no gun. And that's because they later learned during the trial that she had a gun. She said she didn't. And when she got called out on her lie after they left her alone, she went and disposed the gun, throwing one of them, the gun, into a dumpster and the ammunition into another. Police also obtained phone records. Those records placed her near the crime scene in Durham the day before the shooting, despite her claims that she had never been to the city. So investigators found gunshot residue while inspecting her car on the wheel and the gear shift of the car, but nothing else linked her to the shooting. Her family didn't feel like she did this. They stood by her. Her family were blaming Jameer, saying that he did it, that he wanted Shannon to come back to him. Her mom, Ann Crawley, said he was so possessive that, my daughter just didn't want any type of relationship with him. But it's obvious that she was lying to her mother, and you'll see later on that her parents, Shannon's parents, still believe her. So 5 days after the murder, Shannon is taken into custody. These detectives were working. She is arrested. Her family hires an attorney for her. She's granted bail. While out on bail, they come up with a new story apparently that happened that is presented at trial. So Shannon says after she and Jameer broke up, he began stalking her. She said she brought a gun from a co-worker because he had threatened her and her children. She alleged the day before the murder that he forced her to drive with him to Durham to case the apartment, then forced her at gunpoint to return the next day. What kind of crap is that? Doesn't sound believable at all to me, but this is her story. She's sticking to it, and for whatever reason, her family believes it. She says, he said, I'll make it real simple. Either your children die or you die for your children. I mean, she's using lines that I think I would hear in a script, but she is literally on recording saying this to investigators, and this is presented at trial. So she says she doesn't want to. She didn't want to do anything to her, but she was in fear of what he would do. So she goes with him to the apartment. She says she waits in the SUV and he gets out. While she's in her SUV, she can supposedly hear arguing. She claimed that she got out, and just as she got out, she heard a gunshot. He came running back and got in the driver's seat and then threw himself into the back seat where he hid as they drove off from the complex. That doesn't add up either, because if he did get in the driver's seat, then maintenance would have seen, or Michael would have seen him going to the car as well, not just you. Doesn't make sense. After Danita's death, while Shannon was out on bond on the 20th of June, 2008, she tells police that Jameer AR'd her, that he came to her house in Charlotte where she was staying while on bail, and he AR'd her between 2:30 and 5:30 a.m. that morning. She was extremely descriptive with what she said happened during the assault, saying that he cut her clothes off of her with a knife, he held it to her throat, he cut her thigh, penetrated her vagina with the knife, and then he ejaculated. She claimed that she needed stitches. Pamela, a detective in the SA unit of Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, testified that based on the alleged time of the R and Jameer's cell phone records, he would have had to travel from Charlotte to Greensboro for work at approximately 120 miles per hour without stopping for red lights to have committed that assault. Meaning there's no possible way that if you were assaulted, it was done by him, because he was at work and he wouldn't have been capable of getting back to work at that time had he assaulted you. So all this is going on, and she's like, well, if you don't believe me, then just go search his trash can. The evidence is probably in his trash can. So on June 21st, she told the police, look for a knife in his trash can at his house. Jameer said he was putting his trash outside and he noticed a knife in the bottom of the can. Now that sounds like, okay, you just so happen to notice this. You're just saying this because you got busted. But he was smart and he decided to call the police. Police then decided to, question different people in the neighborhood, and witnesses in the neighborhood reported seeing a car pull up and then someone wearing a hoodie get out and put something in the can. Now, they couldn't see what was in the can, but it was something. Brandon Inscore, a neighbor, testified that on June 19th, 2008, he heard a thump and he saw a vehicle drive away from Jameer's trash can. Another neighbor, Jessica Hopkins, said that she saw somebody throw something into his trash can on the 19th of June 2008 and then drive away as well, suggesting to authorities that this had been some type of hoax and a way to frame him. So phone records place him in Greensboro the morning that he supposedly had attacked and R'd her. Our kit found no sign of semen in her body. The prosecution then decides that they're going to present recordings that defense did not want to get out. They were played for the jury. They were supposed to be defense tapes, but the defense didn't intend on using them at trial because of how crazy they sounded. On the tapes, Shannon said that they were secret audio recordings between her and Jameer. In one recording, a man acknowledged in a whisper that he had killed Danita but couldn't go to prison for it. At that point, the jury had heard Jameer talk on more than one occasion. He gave testimony, so it was obvious to jurors that it wasn't his voice. The prosecutors presented this to show a pattern of lies and how vindictive that this woman was when it came to Jameer. She was willing to do any and everything to frame him. David Sachs, the then assistant district attorney, said, "It just did not sound like him at all. There was no way in my mind that was Jameer, because when I heard these tapes, I knew that we had arrested the right person." They heard interviews of Jameer. They heard when he came to testify on the stand. So the tapes were a joke. Jurors hear all this, and at the end of everything, they convict her of first-degree murder. Shannon, however, continues to proclaim her innocence from behind bars. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole back in 2010. When given an opportunity to address the court, she said that she had nothing to say, but her mother, Danita's mother, Sharon Smith, had something to say. She said, "Someday I may forgive you, but I do not right now. I hope you rot in hell." Her father said, "I was thankful to God for the guilty verdict because I was glad that Danita didn't get murdered twice. In my opinion, the evidence spoke for itself. It couldn't have been no other verdict but guilty." But for whatever reason, maybe because it's easier for them to not see her guilt, maybe because they really didn't want to look at the evidence for what it is, maybe because their daughter hasn't been honest with them and really said what happened, but Shannon's parents still are in denial, and they feel like the first-degree murder conviction without parole is an injustice. Her mother, Ann Crawley, said after trial, "Now, it's my daughter who is the perfect victim. The perfect victim for someone like Jameer has now been convicted of a murder that he committed." Her father, Keith, agreed, saying, "If it's the last thing I ever do, I will prove that he is the one that actually committed the crime." I think that it is insane that she is still allowing them to think this. And I think it just goes to show how cruel she is. Because why not spare your parents of wasting that time, that money, and that effort in trying to get you free for a crime that you know that you committed? A guy didn't do it. A woman did it. A jealous, deranged woman. And the sad thing is that Danita did not even know anything about this woman. She didn't see it coming. And Jameer, he gets to go on with his life. He was the cheater, and the innocent party is the one who is no longer here. And who's to say what she would have brought to this world? The judge in the case did not question the verdict to Shannon, But he did not believe that Jameer was without blame either. And when he sentenced Shannon, he said, Jameer caused a perfect storm to happen, and then he walked away from it. And that was unfortunate for everyone in this case. And it was. At some point, he did stop dealing with her, but the damage was already done. And now this young woman is no longer here because the man that she loved, the man that she gave all those positive attributes about, saying that he was her protector, didn't protect her. He put her in danger. You all let me know what you think about this crime. Until next time.